great is if we just start the show with that. That would be amazing. Oh God, this is so good. Oh, those bakeries, they really get it. They get it right. Oh, they are on point.
Why not? Why not?
I like that. What am I, the queen? We could start with me chewing on a croissant. Let's go with it.
What am I, the queen?
What, a man can't eat a chocolate croissant? What am I, the queen?
It's comics, man.
You know what? And on that note, hi everybody and welcome to Comic Lab, the show about making comics.
And we're not going to do a cold open?
No, why? The chocolate croissant is fine.
I wanted to hear that cold open. And making a living from comics. I'm Brad Geiger, editor of webcomics.com and the smooth cartoonist of Evil Inc.
And I'm Dave Kellett, cartoonist of Drive and Sheldon and co-director of Stripped, and our very special guest this week, hailing all the way from, I think, Bellevue, Washington, right? Is that where it is? Or Seattle, Washington?
Yeah, I'm just north of Seattle, Mill Creek, Washington.
Oh, nice.
Very cool. Kazu Kibuishi, you know him from a billion things, and I'll go through the list because I am excited as heck to talk comics with you. So working backwards from your career, and you can tell me if I miss anything here. So you know him probably from the New York Times best-selling series from Scholastic called Amulet, which are huge hits in Brad and my houses.
Oh, we're going to be such heroes for talking to you today. You got to realize this. We get to go back to our kids.
Yeah, we're getting major dad points for this one.
Exactly.
And then you also know him from, I think it was in 2013, the beautiful Harry Potter covers for the whole big beautiful box set that you did. Was that 2013? That was around there, right?
2012. Or that's
2012. All right, Dave Kellett, big on facts today. That's good.
Well, I think it might have. Did it come out in 2013? I think end of 2012. I worked on those at the start of that year.
They came out beautiful regardless. And then before that, he was the editor and one of the creators in the beautiful comics anthology series Flight, which was one of my favorite things I've ever seen. And then even before that, a project that I first met him at UCLA somewhere in the early 2000s, two web-based and self-published projects, Daisy Cutter and Copper. And then even before that, he was a film study student at UCSB and a huge basketball fan and a comics nerd and a movie nerd. And I think he's absolutely fantastic. Kazu, thank you for being on the show today, man.
Well, thanks for having me here. This is going to be fun, I think.
The hesitancy as we put your chocolate croissant on the air.
Yes. I have one more chocolate croissant if you want me to eat it. I can...
No. Give the people what they want. That's what I say.
Okay. Hey, well, so when I'm well fed, then I give better answers. So. Oh, sorry.
That's right. It's a basic sustenance thing. So the one that Brad and I wanted to jump in first with you, because I think it's super exciting and unique, is that, and you can correct me as to the setup of your studio setup currently, but in general, when you're working on Amulet, you have one full-time assistant and co-crew, a colorist that works with you, Jason. And then, as far as I remember, there are a couple satellite folks that come in either through teleconferencing or Dropbox, or sometimes they're in the studio. So you really are maintaining, as the book goes through, a group of 2, 3, sometimes 4 people working on the book. Is that right? Do I have that right?
Yeah, on Amulet 8, I think we had somewhere in the neighborhood of 7 or 8 people.
Wow.
So we, it was just necessary towards the end. We had to call in a lot of help because it was getting really tight, and we had Jason was overwhelmed with the work, and so typically, though, I have Jason working throughout the year to develop content for the background paintings, and just getting ready for the production for the most part throughout the year. This is where we're at right now for Amulet 9. And he's like the only full-time person other than myself. Then we send out pages to be flatted throughout the year. When I'm done drawing a page, I will upload it to our site and or to our server, and assistants around the world can pick them up whenever they want. I have a Google spreadsheet that I use for people to sign up, and when new pages go up, they can go sign up for it. They download it, they do the page, send it back. If we have notes, we'll give them notes, and then we'll color it from there. There's that part of the process. And towards the end of this latest book, we had to bring in a whole bunch of people to come in, and maybe the last 2 or 3 weeks to paint the book, because we still, I think in the last week and a half, we painted half the book.
Wow.
Oh, biscuits.
Yeah, it was like 2 weeks. 2 weeks. I painted like 50 pages myself. So yeah, it was we were pretty far behind on this one. But life intervenes, and we that's just the nature of the game.
But also, as we learned from Jurassic Park, life finds a way. So
no, it's okay. I mean, I sort of equate it to like being in the fourth quarter in a game or something.
Yeah.
And if you know your stuff, you'll get through. If it's production, it's not so bad. When I have to rush on the writing, that's when I'll put the brakes on the whole thing.
Yeah.
Amulet 8 was supposed to be done a year earlier. We should have been talking about this about a year ago, but I held off on moving forward. I didn't think it was ready. So I had to take a big break. I went back and reworked a whole bunch of stuff and found the book, in the second half.
Now, when you have to go to your publisher, and this is published through Scholastic, correct?
Mm-hmm.
When you have to go to your contact person there, I would imagine an editor of some sort, and you've got to say, listen, this story isn't there yet. How does that conversation go?
Well, it's not what they want to hear. But I've been doing this long enough, and I've been working with them long enough that I think they understand. When I sincerely say I can't do this, they'll just make time for it. Yeah. It gets hairy when we're towards the end and we've committed to final deadlines for scheduling and things like that. Those things can't. There are sometimes immovable dates.
Yeah,
and that's like towards the end of production. In the case of Amulet 8, we had an immovable date. There was one,
right.
And it was quite difficult to try to hit it.
And that's mainly because not only are presses waiting to print, there's shipping windows, there's distribution windows, there's pre-published advertising already.
Exactly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yep. So, as long as you can, if you have to, put the project aside for a little bit and take a bit of a break, as long as they know far enough ahead of time, it's possible. Like you can work around it, and you're not hurting the whole operation. But with Amulet 8, we were towards the end. We were having a hard time trying to finish the book, and we had to hit an immovable date.
Yeah.
Well, I imagine that specific moment was both mentally and physically and emotionally exhausting. But in general, do you find, working both with Jason and with the upwards of 8 people, do you find interacting with other artists at the end of the day for you on the project, do you find that emotionally energizing or emotionally draining?
The day-to-day?
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, like if in an ideal world for you, would you prefer to be in a studio type environment, or would you prefer to be flying solo? Or I guess what I'm getting at is, does the nature of the project require other people in such a way that it forces it on you? Or do you actively love, as an artist, working with other artists?
I love working with other artists. I was in the film industry. I loved it. I worked in all sorts of fields, including architecture. I love working in a group environment. I love working on flight, all that stuff. But at the same time, I also love being a dad.
Yeah.
And that comes first. My family always comes first.
Right.
And being a comic artist allows me that flexibility. And that's important to me. I make less than in another career path, but I make enough, for us to get through. And it works for me. So I don't know. I adjust my work process to the environment that I'm in.
Right.
I don't try to make the world change to the way I do things. I find that approach, I don't know, that doesn't come together very well.
Yeah.
Because then you start getting upset about things not going your way, and if you go into a situation expecting things not to go your way, you won't be as upset when things start falling apart.
Right.
Well, what I wanted to know was knowing that this new book is coming up. At some point, are there at times where Scholastic is going to say, "Now, listen, we need you to hit social media really hard in this upcoming month," or do they put a schedule in front of you and say, "Okay, you've got to travel to this place and that place and this place to start promoting that book"? What kind of impetus is put on you to promote that book socially and in person?
I think it's as much pressure as I want to put on myself. Mm-hmm. I do put a lot of pressure on myself, but I also I don't do as much traveling as I think a lot of the top level authors do. I'm okay with that. I can't be away too long from my family because, like I said, all the the home life stuff that comes first. Right. Yeah, I don't know. Scholastic really doesn't put that much pressure on me. They've just been really kind. They'll do the best they can. I think in some sense, I just feel like we're on a team and, and they're asking me for things that I need. And, I'm generally not asking too much from them. I'm just, preparing to do the work. I think that's enough. I think that's helping them a lot. If I finish the book as close to being on time as possible, and I'm being on the road and doing as much self-promotion as I can, I think that's helping them. But yeah, we're in the process of promoting the books. This is the fun part. Mm-hmm. I don't think there's no pushing. I mean, they suggest like, why don't you try this or try that? But for the most part, it's more like, hey, look, we got this thing for you. We got a interview on this website or that website or this magazine. Did you want to do this? Would you be interested? And I either say yes or I almost always say yes if they have something for me to do, and that's it. I mean, it's not it's not really a high pressure situation. It was a lot different when I was working on Harry Potter because that Amulet has become a big thing, I think. But with Harry Potter, for Scholastic, that's their baby. It's a big beast. Yeah, that's a big thing. So I had a lot of preparation to be a part of that. That they actually sat down with me and talked to me about preparing to promote it and what that might entail, the kinds of things I may experience, and just to be ready.
I'm imagining this pre-meeting of like, all right, now there's going to be some fans, and when we say fans, we mean people that will want locks of hair.
Yeah, and the Harry Potter fans were amazing. They were the best. They're so kind and so polite. It was not a problem at all. But being on message as far as like what I'm going to say about the project, things like that, they wanted to make sure that I was sort of on board with all that. With Amulet, they don't do that with me. They leave me be. I'm the author. It's my thing. I don't know. I don't even think about all that stuff. I mean, I try to promote well,
but they didn't give you basically a big contractual checklist of all the things with Amulet like you had with Harry Potter. I'm assuming with Harry Potter, you probably had to agree to X amount of appearances and X amount of like prepared statements or interviews, kind of a thing. But with this one, they're more free.
I don't remember if I had to do that.
Oh, okay.
They asked me if I would do all those things, and I said okay.
Well, the nice thing for you, public speaking wise, because I the last time I saw you give a talk, I think was at Ohio State, and I don't know if you remember this one. This was when they were opening up the new museum there, and you gave a wonderful talk that I think you do on other occasions, which is basically a public painting while you're talking, and I can only imagine how magical that must be for a 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old, because for me as an adult and as a friend, I was like, this is magical. It was just delightful to watch you work because it's so different from the way that I work. And I was wondering if you could take a second just to describe how you do public speaking for kids as you do a paint and talk process.
Yeah, well, it begins with sort of a TED Talk, right? It's about perseverance, about not giving up. My career has been full of situations where things really did not work for me. And I would find myself in this hole and I'd have to sit there and just think, okay, well, what am I going to do? Am I going to sit and look at my toes and do nothing? Am I just going to feel bad about this? And usually I just, eventually, after sleeping or thinking about it for a bit, I just get up and then get back to it and do the project again. When things don't work out. So I do a talk about that, about just going back and doing this thing. And if that doesn't work, then try something else. And then towards the end, I will do a Q&A, but while I'm answering questions, I'm painting live for the kids. So because I imagine that there's going to be a small group of kids in that are not interested in what's going on, because they need a little bit more of a visual stimulus. So if I sit there and just answer questions for individual fans, I don't know if those kids would be as entertained. So when I paint, I'm giving all the kids who are daydreaming a place to go. And I'm also sort of daydreaming and painting a landscape. And so what I do is I set up the computer. It's hooked up to the projector, and I just open Photoshop and I just go in and do a landscape painting most of the time. Unless somebody wants me to do a very specific thing, like a spaceship or something like that, I'll go ahead and do that. And and imagine as a kid, I would have thought that was magical, and I probably would have wanted to be a comic artist if I saw that.
It really is. It's so lovely in the sense that knowing the tools you're using in Photoshop, knowing how you're doing it, I'm still like, what an entrancing talk this is. I'm a grown man and I'm entranced.
Well, go back just for a minute, because this has been a theme on this podcast where we talk about it's okay to get to a point where you're like, oh, I've hit a dead end. We get so wrapped up in failure that we forget that it's during those times that we learn the most. So take me back. You mentioned things that did not work. Take me back to one of those instances where you found yourself things are not working out. What was that point, and how did you overcome it?
Yeah. So my website is boltcity.com, right? My company is Bolt City Productions. People know me as Bolt City online. Bolt City was my first massive failure. It was actually the title of my student film. It was an animated film I had worked on for about 2 years, going into senior year in college. I anticipated it to be my entry into the world of animation, that I was going to get a directing job and get a feature for it, because a lot of people thought that this was going to win a Student Academy Award. This is going to be some big deal. Every time anybody saw little bits of it, they were so excited. One night I came home from my job at the newspaper. I was illustrating editorial cartoons for the Daily Nexus. Come home around 10 o'clock, and I'd start animating up until 5 in the morning. And I did that every day of my senior year of college. And towards the end of my senior year, and I'm still like maybe only halfway done with this thing, I come home and I noticed that someone had broken into my apartment and stole my computer, my hard drives, just everything that had the film on it.
Oh, no.
And it just basically vaporized. Oh. And that was like my ticket out, that's what I felt at the time. I'd worked so hard on this thing. A part of it, the whole time though, I really didn't want to make it. I felt like I was doing it for my career. I felt like I was doing it for my professor who was into animation and he wanted me to animate. I had no interest in animating at the time. Oh. I just knew I would need a job because I would have to, then the next thing was I would have to take care of my parents after college. I knew that was coming. In fact, it was right around that time I got a phone call from my mom, and she told me something that I had suspected, just that my dad had lost his job a number of months prior, and that I would have to go get a job so that I could support them, and that they would no longer be able to help me with my college, which I anticipated all this happening, so it wasn't a surprise. But to have all that happen after having lost the one thing I had, in my corner to help me.
And this was before uploading everything to the cloud and all like that. When they carted that hardware out of your apartment, well, that's what I'm saying. For the younger people,
I'm talking about this is in the 90s, So I built my own computer. I was forcing Adobe Premiere in its early incarnation to do things that it normally doesn't do. For my animated film. and it wasn't considered an editing program like a pro level editing program that some people do now. It was very much for the consumer. And yeah, I learned a lot in the process of it, but when I saw that it would take too long to finish it, I decided I have to put that aside. That's just not going to happen. And after I graduated from college, I went and just took the first job I can get, and it was as a graphic designer. And so I did that for a number of years.
Wow, I've never heard that story.
Oh yeah, I've got plenty like that.
Absolutely breaks my heart, though.
So there's no version of this that exists anywhere. This early Bolt City animation.
Just some small MOV like QuickTime files that I have. I have a couple. Yeah. Honestly,
God.
And knowing film production, I know how much like more work there was to be done than I anticipated, because the whole project was at the time just becoming much, much bigger than I thought it would be.
Right.
Yeah, that whole time. So in some sense, when it was stolen, I felt quite a bit of relief though too.
Yeah. Yeah, because like you were saying, you were doing this for your professor. You were doing this because you felt you needed to.
For career stuff, yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and now this is taken right out of your hands. So now, I'm sorry, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time in the negative zone here, but I'm fascinated. So now you become a graphic artist, and you're helping to support your parents, right?
Yeah. I was sending everything, like almost everything I made, just enough for me to live on. I kept, in my bank account just to feed myself, and sending the rest of it to pay for my parents' mortgage.
Okay, what's the next step? Now you've at some point, have you started doing web comics yet? At this point,
no. So I was just working corporate. I actually started working on Amulet around that time, just in college. So it's old.
Oh wow!
And I gave it a try, and it was just too hard. I just thought comics, even if I made a living doing it, I don't know if it would be worth this much energy to do it. Like if just a few people read it, I just thought, oh, I don't know. It would be quite an endeavor to become a good graphic novelist. That's how I felt at the time. And graphic novels didn't really exist in like a mainstream sense at the time.
Not like they do now, that's for sure. Yeah.
So, in the late 90s, I'm just thinking, well, if I do this, I'd have to also invent it.
Exactly.
So, the only person I saw doing something that looked like a new platform was Jeff Smith, with Bone. I just felt like, okay, that maybe it can be done that way. And so I really looked up to Jeff at the time. And I still do, of course. He's one of my big heroes.
So how do you get out of the hole? How do you get out of that? I'm dying over here.
Brad needs closure on this.
I really do. I'm over here. My heart's just aching. How do you turn the corner on that? Because I'm telling you why. I'm telling you what. There's a lot of people listening to this show right now that are exactly in that spot in their lives. They're in that hole, and so I want to know how you got out.
Yeah, so I was working in corporate as a graphic designer for a short time. I started on a web startup that paid very well in Santa Barbara, and when that startup folded, I got a job at an architecture firm in downtown Los Angeles. So then I was working in LA, and at this time I was still supporting my parents. And then I think that year my brother graduated and he started working as an engineer, and so he was able to take some of that load.
Yeah.
So actually, behind the scenes of every success that I've had, you can find my brother there. My little brother's always been there.
Wow.
And so that's a key. That's one of the big key things to all of this working, is that he's always been there to catch me when I needed him.
Well, that's what brothers do, right?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully. I think in my case, yes. He's aside from my wife, he's my next best friend.
Yeah.
So it was 9/11 in 2001 when the towers went down. I was working in a tower in downtown Los Angeles. There was I think one of the planes was supposed to go to LA. So I actually even called my friend to get out of the building because he had no idea what was going on that morning. And it was intense. You know, I went to work the next, I think that week. And so what was happening was I was being promoted into a nice job as a graphic designer for the architecture firm. Looked like a career, basically, right in front of me. Yeah. Wonderful people, a dream job, really, like probably the best job you can imagine, working for the nicest people. Everybody was great. And you got to work on great projects. You got paid well, you know, and it just looked like a dream, but I felt like it wasn't what I should be doing in this world. You know, right. I had been, it was hard to explain to somebody, like I've spent all my life drawing cartoons, and as worthless as it may seem to other people, I know there's value in this somewhere. And I have to stick with it, and I can't explain it correctly, like why that is. Understanding Comics by Scott McCloud actually helped me be able to explain it to some people, the value and worth of a comic book. But yeah, I was in a tough place, but 9/11 happens. I'm sitting there thinking, okay, I could sit here in a corporate job and just try to make a living, or I can do the thing that I think I should be doing because I could probably be one of the best to ever do it. I should go do that. So from then on, every difficult decision that came my way became a little bit easier for me because I knew that I had to stick with comics. So when Jeff Smith asked me to do the Bone movie, you know, I was intrigued, and I had to really think about it because that was my dream project. I wanted to do that really badly, and I had been tracking it since I was in college, the project, and when it was at Nickelodeon and all that stuff. And I thought I thought I could be the one to be able to show it up on the screen. And when that came about, I realized that it was more important for me to work on something like Bone, the book, that we should have more of that out in the world than a Bone movie, which would be great. I mean, they're still going to make the movie, I think. But I felt like somebody else, there are some talented directors out there just waiting in the wings. There's just tons of talent all over the place. And I felt like there wasn't anybody lining up to do a graphic novel. So I thought, well, you know, I should continue with this. And this is around the time I was working on Amulet 2. I was still not making a living off of Amulet. You know, it was a difficult decision, but it was easier to make because of what happened prior, you know. Because
I remember that period where, and I remember admiring you at the time because the conversations we had, you knew that this was a long-term play. And play is not the right word, but you know what I'm getting at, was that you were like, no, this is not going to make money year one, may not make money year two, might start making money year three, but really the joy of this process will also result in a payday that's significant in years 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And you were right. You gave yourself the time the years, frankly, to make it work. And that's so admirable because it's such a great delay of satisfaction for a project of huge scope.
Well, that's what I wanted to point out too, Dave, is especially to our listeners. You talk about persistence when you're doing some of these public talks. The thing to point out here is that at some point you had to step away from that goal while you went into corporate and you were a graphic designer and you were working these different jobs. The dream never died, but you had to step away from it because you had other priorities. It wasn't until you had gotten to a point where you had those basic needs met that you decided, okay, now I'm going to go back and take another swing at this dream. Because I think what happens, the danger is people hear people talk about never give up on your dreams, never give up on your dreams. And they're like, okay, I'm going to be a cartoonist. I'm going to be a cartoonist. They're not paying their bills. They're getting deeper into debt. And they're like, no, I've been told not to give up on my dreams. And the real key to persistence is what you just got done talking about, which is I still got this thing. It's still something I'm working on, but I'm going to meet these basic needs with a day job first, right?
Yes and no. I was quite committed to this. So when I started on Amulet for real, it was after I'd been working for about 2 years as a creative director at an animation studio. So I had saved up maybe about just 10 to 12,000 in the bank, just on the side, for me to work on a small project. And then Flight sort of came together in my free time, and I realized that it was basically sucking me into comics at the time, because I needed to see that project through. I felt like it was like I couldn't let those artists down.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And even though it would cost me a lot to get it made, thankfully Image stepped in to, handle the printing. I really had no choice there. I had to quit my job. I ended up having to quit my job when my coworkers confronted me about it and said, we'd like your company partner. We'd like you to either be here all the time, or if you're going to do comics, you should go do that. And so I said, okay, I guess I'll do that. I got to go do comics.
Wow.
Let me switch gears for a second and ask an art question, because as someone who's working on a long form story myself now, I find this sort of interesting. When you first started to seriously work on Amulet in terms of character designs or the world or even designing the amulet itself, did you ever have a thought in the back of your head of like, whatever I go with, I'm stuck for the next decade or 15 years in terms of design?
No.
Do you know what I mean by that? Like, there's some elements that, like, hey, if they're in a ship for the next 15 pages, I can have as much fun with it as I want because it's only for 15 pages. But when you're designing a character that, even at that point, I think the books were going to be 7, I think, a series of 7 or maybe 6. I don't remember it originally, but you knew you were in for this for many, many pages. And was there any hesitation? Was it excitement? Was it a little more effort, a little less effort because the joy was there? What was that process of designing those elements in the story that you knew you would be drawing for hundreds and hundreds of pages?
Well, I try not to think about the hundreds and hundreds of pages.
That's fair enough. Fair enough.
But actually, with my designs, I actually spent very little time doing it. It's funny. I used to do character design and concept art and everything like that in the film industry. And I spent more time on those things than I do on things in Amulet. Partly because I feel like I don't know, if a design's going to work properly until I see the story. So, for example, if I'm going to draw a particular character, I see that character is going to be viewed at certain angles a lot, or that, then I will design that character to look good and feel good to draw in those types of angles. Somebody who's like moving quickly, you don't want it to be too round,
right, right.
Because it doesn't express speed, or things like that. So a lot of times what I do is I just start drawing the character into the book, into the rough versions of my pages, into the thumbnails, and I just I thumbnail each sequence about 8 to 10 times.
Oh, geez, Louise! Wow.
Oh, yeah, but I do them quickly. So like I can do a 40-page sequence of thumbnails in like 2 hours, maybe 3 hours. So they look just like, it looks like chicken scratch,
Yeah.
It's just enough to get. I try to draw as close to the speed of reading as I can.
Right.
When I do the roughs, so that I'm sort of experiencing it, and I'm just kind of recording this sketch of the scene. And then I'll usually just sit back and I'll come back to it the next day to see if I have anything good there. And I do it again, and then I do it again, and I do it again, and I do it again. Sometimes it gets worse. Sometimes it gets a little better. And there's some crinkles in every version that I think is fairly good. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, any one of those drafts is not good enough to be published in my mind. Mm-hmm. So after I've, done it several times, at least 3 times, I'll sit and look at it and go, am I ready to get on stage? And that's really what I ask myself. I think in my mind is, am I ready for a stage rehearsal now? Which is the pencils, And if I feel like I can see the scene really clearly because of all the different drafts, then I'll go ahead and say, this is the day. So then instead of doing thumbs, I will pencil. And a lot of times it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Sometimes it just doesn't work, But if I calculate it correctly, it works, and then I can go ahead and ink it. And if I have extra time, sometimes I'll just go ahead and scrap it. There have been times where I'd actually, draw up to like 40, 50 pages inked and we're already coloring, and we just scrapped the whole thing.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's gotta be a big decision. It's gotta hurt a little bit, right?
Well, in book 1, I didn't know what I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually drew the whole thing, pretty much inked the whole thing. And it was an awful book and in the first draft, and just doesn't work. Anybody who read it would know, like, it's okay. There's some good stuff in it, cool concepts, but it wasn't a well-rounded read. Did it twice, second time, it's even worse, and then third time it was just as bad, but there was some good stuff in it. And then it was Jeff Smith who actually read it, and he actually told me, hey man, it's not bad, there's some good stuff in there. And that's all I needed to hear, because I did agree with that, and he was honest that he didn't say it's good, he said it's not bad, and that was enough for me to say, well, I don't need to scrap the whole thing. So I took little bits of the first 3 versions, and then took a look. Like, I just laid them all out on the floor, and I said, is there a book here? And I saw the book, and I said, you know what? I can make sequences between these sequences, and it'll be a book.
Yeah.
So then I made a new book, and that's that. And then I accidentally fell into the process of making Amulet. So I actually draw the whole book out of sequence. In fact, in Amulet 8, the first sequence in that book, I didn't even know what happens in that until the very, very end of the production. And it was the last sequence I drew.
Mm.
Wow. And what do you gain from that? Is that add a sense of surprise? Is that what that is?
I often try to leave the first sequence open and unwritten and not drawn, because I see it as a table setter. And if I don't know what meal I'm serving, I don't know how to set the table very well. You know what I mean?
Ah, that's an interesting way to look at that.
Yeah. Then again, there are some books like Amulet 7 and number 1 where I knew what I had to start with, and I built the whole book around that first scene. So they were the key scenes. Like the first scene of Amulet 1 had never changed. That was the very first thing I ever drew. Nothing about that has changed. And in Amulet 7, I was revisiting that first scene. So that opening scene of Amulet 7, even though I had drafted a whole bunch of other different versions of that of scenes in general, the opening scene of Amulet 7 was one of the first things I drew for that.
Well, what I'm hearing here and in the story of your early career so far is that adaptability is kind of your hallmark. Like what the book needs is what you give it, and that's really something to be respected.
It makes it more fun as well. I mean, that's something. It's to take care of myself as well. I don't want to go into a book knowing what I'm going to do, because then it's like repaying this debt that I've collected, that I had, like that I owed the book, the story.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I hear that in the voice of a lot of writers when they're writing. I just think that they're stressed out about making their book because they feel they owe it to the book to make it better, and I try not to be in that position.
Right.
So, Kazu, while we're on this topic, I know a lot of our listeners are going to be interested in this, and this is something that Dave and I don't have a lot of experience with, and that is working with a publisher. How would you suggest someone go about trying to submit work to a publisher for consideration?
I mean, it's difficult because it really depends on where the market's at.
Mm-hmm.
When you go and discuss things with your agent. First off, have an agent.
Oh, now see that that would not have been my first guess. So you're saying
really?
The first thing you really need is an agent.
Absolutely.
And why is that?
It's for everyone's sake. You want to enter into discussion where both parties are ready to negotiate a professional deal in a proper setting,
mm-hmm.
where you don't over promise. You know what I mean? It doesn't get awkward.
Yeah.
Your publisher will be able to, your agent will be able to protect you, but also protect the publisher as well. And most people in the publishing industry know that that's the protocol. So when you talk to an editor and they say, and you talk to them and say, I have this project, I think it's interesting. And they're like, oh, that sounds like something I'd like to publish. And for the most part, they'll, if they don't know you, they'll just say, so who's your agent? And then you'll want to give them your agent's name. And then they'll say, okay, that's it. That's all I need. And then the discussions begin.
And if you're saying that if I don't have an agent at that point, maybe they're not going to take me very seriously. What happens if you don't have an agent?
Yeah, so some publishers will take on people with no agents, especially in graphic novels, because I don't think most people know to have one.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, you will most likely have a contract that you will regret.
And how did you find your agent?
Through Scott McCloud. So I was very fortunate.
Oh, is that right?
I just contact. Yeah, I didn't with Daisy Cutter, I didn't have an agent. I just worked on my own. However, prior to that, I was working in the film industry. I had an agent in film. I was trained to pitch by a lawyer at CAA. So I had a very different background coming into comics. So I did negotiate an okay deal for myself on Daisy Cutter.
Mm-hmm.
But with the next book, I knew I would have to have a professional involved.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that I could possibly negotiate myself, I contacted Scott McCloud, and he just basically said, when Scholastic came to me and said, "We'd like to do a book with you," and I said, "Okay, well, I do have a book in mind." And then they said, "Okay, well, I don't know if they asked if I had an agent or if I forgot what happened. I think I just went out and reached out to Scott McCloud, and I just said, Scott, what do I do in this situation?" He said, "Don't do anything until you call Judy." And my agent is Judy Hansen, who is just the best. There's not much. What can I say? I mean, she essentially invented the graphic novel.
Wow.
If there was somebody I could credit for the invention of the graphic novel, it would be her.
Really?
And she represents, she represents Will Eisner,
mm-hmm.
And and Scott, and Raina, me.
Wow.
Ben Hadke, Gene Yang, Robert Crumb.
So a bunch of nobodies is what I'm hearing. I'm hearing a big list of nobodies.
But I mean, a lot of why graphic novels are what they are today is because it's because she's been working on creating this platform for years.
Wow,
since the 80s.
Right. Well, even though this is a bit of an insertion, one resource I would like to share with people is that there's a cartoonist by the name of Nikki Smith, Niki, and she maintains a big list of literary agents who represent graphic novels, and it's now up to 88 agencies. So do a quick Google search, and we'll have the link over on Comic Lab. You can look for Niki Smith, and if you just search for agents and graphic novels and cartooning, you'll find her list of 88 agencies that represent cartoonists. So that might be of some help to some people.
Yeah, right now there are a lot of publishers who want to get into the graphic novel thing, so it would be a good time to reach out.
Yeah, that YA audience is exploding in publishing. Just as a dad watching that happen, it's fantastic. It's so delightful to see.
Well, just in our lifetimes. I mean, in the time that my kids went to school, and my older son is 16 years old now and a sophomore in high school. Right, we've gone through. They're not allowed to read comics and graphic novels in school because that wasn't serious, to this year being assigned graphic novels like Gene's book, American Born Chinese, was on the summer reading list for my younger son as an assignment. So we've gone in just that span of time from they just starting to be taken seriously to now they're part of the curriculum. And that's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, when we were growing up, collectively the three of us, you kind of had Tintin, you had Babar, you had it was like Babar. A weird collection of like 1950s kind of semi-racist comics where you're like, I don't know that I should be reading this. And now it's just, I'm so happy as a dad what I can find at the library, at the bookstore, just casually, like not even hunting. I'm as a cartoonist, and I'm like, I did not know this book existed, and this is an amazing book. I feel like we're just in an explosion of it's like, those it's not the Paleozoic, but there's certain ages where life just exploded. Yeah. And I feel like that's where we are with comics, where it's just an explosion of creativity, and the market is finding value there, and books are selling, and frankly it's an amazing time to be a cartoonist in that format.
Yes, it is. So now listen, Dave, we've come to the part of the show that I'd love to see, especially since there's three of us here. We take questions from our $5 level Patreon backers. And I've got a couple that we've pulled here that I think I particularly want to hear Kazu's responses to.
Sure, yeah.
Do you want to take some questions?
Sure.
Let's do it.
All right. So here's one. How much impact do readers' comments and feedback have on your writing?
Great question.
Yeah.
It's huge. In the case of Amulet 7, I was drawing this epic action sequence where one of my characters is escaping from this pirate prison. And Jason was actually totally in love with the sequence because he was so excited to draw it, and it read well and everything. But I just felt like we shouldn't spend 20, 30 pages with a side character at the time. I knew something in the back of my mind wasn't working. Something about the sequence wasn't working for me. So I just kept revising it. I went to do a book signing at Books of Wonder in Manhattan. And a little girl asked me what happened at the end of Amulet 5. I mean, I had just finished Amulet 6, and I was out on the road to promote 6. And I thought, wow, that is a really good question. I never really firmly answered that in the series. So I decided to go back and do that. And all of Amulet 7 became an answer to the question that she asked.
Wow.
Wow. Thanks, Susie. That was a great question.
Yeah. So I basically scrapped that 30-page sequence and I made a whole new book.
Wow.
And then I think somebody asked me another good question about Amulet 8 while I was working on that. Somebody in the audience asked me the question, what happened to Trellis's mom? And that was crazy because I had just prior to that event, maybe about a week prior, I had decided to answer that question in the opening sequence. So even though that question didn't spur the scene, it did tell me that I was on the right track as far as what my readers are probably thinking.
It was an indication that needed to be answered. Yeah.
Their questions are I mean, they're the end user, it's, these are the readers. These are, this is the customer. I'd like to hear what they think.
Yeah. Well, Brad, let me turn that question to you. Do you respond to reader comments, input, thoughts?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you have to, especially in the zone that we find ourselves into as self-publishers when you're doing crowdfunding and that sort of thing. Being responsive to the people who are supporting you at that level becomes really, really important. In fact, on my Patreon, I just opened up a weekly Ask Me Anything type column where I'm going out and approaching patrons and saying, okay, what do you want to know? What things are on your mind? And I find that not only is that good in terms of retention and stuff like that, but it keeps me on my toes because sometimes, and I'm sure you both have dealt with this, they ask you a question and then it hits you like a brick where you go, oh yeah, I've got to put a lot of thought into this. Maybe it was a throwaway kind of thing. And it's like, oh yeah, I've got to think about how that works in the world that I've built. And maybe I didn't do such a good job of that in the first swing. So yeah, there's a lot of that it's good to be kept on your toes by that sort of thing. What about you, Dave?
Well, I much like I assume happens with both of you, I never compromise the central vision of what I want to create. You know what I mean? Like if all the readers said like, we want to see so-and-so die in the story, but that's not what I want to do. That's not what the story wants to go.
Yeah.
I'm not going to compromise that. But the way I equate it is kind of like, in the past I did stand-up and I did sketch comedy, and you're kind of swimming in laughter or the lack of laughter. And you adjust your performance. If people are really loving a moment and you as a performer are loving a moment, why fight that? Why would you ever want to fight that? Enjoy that, swim in that, revel in that moment. If it benefits the overall story, then go with it. It's amazing. At the same time, if you are putting out what you think is gold and you're getting back silence at it, either as an artist you're not hitting the mark, or something about the story itself is not hitting the mark. So I absolutely do a little dance not a dance, but it's like you adjust your footing on how you're telling the story based on how people are reacting to it. And I think only in the best possible way. Like, we all three of us know to discount. There are always the outlier crazies or the outlier, people that are like, what if everybody was blue in the story? And you're like, all right, great. Thanks for the comment. All right. See you at the next signing. And then
it's the blue guy again. Hey, honey, I'm getting the comment from the blue guy again.
Yeah. Well, we all have that one reader it's got the crazy idea. What I'm saying is, as long as it fits within the world and still is central to your vision for what your story wants to be, I think it's only natural to respond and react to how readers are feeling about it. And when it's good, it helps you as an artist. And also, to bring back to one of the earlier things, it's part of the central joy of being an artist is you want to communicate to these people. We are storytellers, and so to be getting a reaction that's joy filled only increases our joy as an artist and makes us want to do more of what we do. So that's the way I feel about it.
Absolutely.
Well, let me ask you both a different question. Mm-hmm. So this is also from a listener of the show, and this is kind of a fun one, Kazu, so I'll ask you first. Mm-hmm. So what skills have you painstakingly developed or agonized over that time or technology have now rendered completely useless?
Oh, and read the rest of that question, Dave, because this is crucial.
Okay. And do you wish you had that time back now?
Yeah, that's the clincher for me on that question.
I don't know. I think everything's been useful. I can't think of a useless skill, because you never know. You never know when you'll need it.
Yeah.
So yeah. And when you're a comic artist, you're kind of a generalist, right? So you have to do so many different things. So having all these varied skills has been a strength rather than a weakness. I often think of just how much sports has helped me. Mm-hmm. Just in general, like, being physically fit as a cartoonist is so important. Something that I try to talk about as much as I can, because that's the one thing that I think it gets glossed over is everyone thinks they're just sitting there and it's not physically straining, but it is. And if you hurt yourself, you won't be able to draw.
Right. Yeah. If you're not taking good care of your body, you're not going to be able to do that for very long. Even the act of sitting in a chair.
Right. And with my sports, I always try to, or with my exercise, I always try to combine it with strategy, where I'm playing basketball or I'm going out on a mountain bike and I'm having to strategically move down the mountain and choose the right line so I don't get hurt, or I can go faster. These things help me when I go to work on the book, and I just apply that type of thinking to my work.
Yeah.
And so I always find ways to have it help me. In fact, I'd been mountain biking so much and I studied so much about biking, it found its way into Amulet 8. And so I ended up having to design my own bikes in there. I wanted people to want to ride bikes, reading Amulet in the way that I wanted to get on a bike when I was watching E.T. Mm-hmm. So that found its way in there. So you never know what's going to help you out. If I was learning about cooking, I'm sure it would find its way in there. Mm-hmm. If I was anything.
Yeah, the nice thing about working as an artist for years and years and years is that your central idea there, the idea that there's nothing wasted, there's no experience wasted, has been proven true again and again and again in my own career, because like any job that I had in the past, like when I would clean doctor's offices in college to work my way through college and stuff, it's like that is not wasted, because that moment of drudgery, now I know how to write that moment of drudgery in my comics. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. That life experience is something I can draw on. The excitement of like Kazu playing sports and how those moments, the big moments, the practices that lead up to it, the game days, the post game recaps, that can inform my writing. You will use every life experience you have eventually if you cartoon long enough, because you need the material. But I will say the one thing that I have worked on that feels wasted looking back on it is learning and mastering computer interfaces that are no longer at all in existence. So like book layouts like Adobe PageMaker, or I'm trying to think of the one that I used before, that Quark Express, I guess. Like,
oh yeah, Quark.
What a bunch of wasted time now that is, looking back. I mean, I needed it at the time, so I guess it wasn't wasted. But boy, I just wish we could all settle on an interface and just leave it at that.
Well, Quark led directly into InDesign, so yeah, that wasn't even a waste.
Yeah.
But I do see what you are saying in terms of that. But two things. I was listening, Dave, to last week's show and driving into the studio, and you were talking about being up, working on a comic until 2:00 in the morning because family and professional life dictated that that's what needed to happen that day.
Right.
And that's when knowing you as I do, that experience of cleaning doctors' offices comes right in handy, because as you're going into the 2:00 hour, and you really maybe would rather just say screw it all and go to bed, there's a thing that goes off in the back of your head and says, well, listen, you could always be back scrubbing doctors' offices.
That's true.
This certainly seems like drudgery, but it ain't. And for me, it was working in the factory with my dad summers while I was going to college, and he did that on purpose. There was no internship in Spain, where I would do all. It was you're going to work in the factory with me and get metal shavings under your fingernails and show up at 5:00 every morning and work in an unair conditioned barn, basically, with machines running. And
where were you working? 1840?
Oh my! Well, dude, I told you, Huron County, everything came about 10 years late to Huron County, including
apparently
OSHA.
The internal combustion engine also came late.
But listen, at the end of that 3 months of summer, I went back to college ready to learn, because my dad would say every week, you don't do well at college. This is your future. This is what you got to look forward to. So get in there and study, Toon Boy, do what you got to do. But yeah, that is instructive to that. And plus, you guys both hit it right on the head. There's not a thing that you learn that is wasted time. I did a lot of hand lettering for a couple of years on my strip, and I do digital lettering now, but all that stuff that I learned doing hand lettering, all that typography, all of that design that goes into characters and spacing and leading and kerning, all of that stuff I learned through doing it by hand makes my digital lettering so much better, because I can go in and control that at a much finer level than I would have if I would have spent the time learning hand lettering. If I would have considered that to be a waste, it absolutely informs your later work. So there's don't look at this as learning something new might be wasted. Learning something new is never a waste.
Yeah,
I agree with that.
Well, let me ask a fun one to sort of end off the day for us, and we can each tackle this one as we want, but I'll ask it of Kazu first. So what in your drawing, in the creation of a book, you can either do it in the big picture of creation of the book or in your day-to-day cartooning, what is the best part of your day, and what is the part you look forward to least work-wise? Not family-wise, not business-wise, but work-wise. What is the favorite part of the day? What is the least favorite part of the day?
Well, my least favorite part of the process is starting.
Yeah.
Ooh, okay.
And my favorite part of the process is when I figured something out. And I think that's it. That's the full range, isn't it? Everything in the middle, I don't know. I don't know. It's that's it.
But the spark for you when it clicks into place, that's when that's the best moment.
Yeah. Okay. So every time I make a book, I know that there's inductive and deductive reasoning going on, right? So you set up the problem and then you got to solve the problem. Solving the problem is actually fun. That's easy. Like when I do contract work for somebody, most of that is deductive, right? Because they give me an assignment. I know what I'm doing, and I sit down and I just try to articulate a solution. Now, when it's my book, I have to create the problem. I have to design a problem that will be solved in such a manner that a reader will learn something from it. And that's really hard. Trying to figure out what that problem is that I have to design is, it takes forever. And I think I enjoy the process of learning things to create that problem, but I don't like it when I'm on the clock doing that because I don't know where it's coming from. I'm fishing, I'm out there just looking for this thing. And I can't tell the fish to just jump on the hook. So that part, just the pressure that I would get is the hard part, is trying to, that's the political side of it, right? Like I have to tell people, yeah, I'll get it done. Yeah, it'll be, this'll come in, but nobody can truly answer like how much time that particular part takes, the inductive reasoning. But if someone told me, here's the problem, I know exactly how long it takes to solve it.
Oh, there's no better way to put that. I mean, the most daunting thing in the world is nothing. Mm-hmm. Nothing is daunting. Once you've got something, you can solve the problem. Now because you've got something, you know what the thing is. But when you're staring at that blank page and nothing is facing back at you, that's the worst.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I got to tell you, though, I'm thankful of you using the terminology of inductive and deductive reasoning, because I had not thought to think of it that way, and that is a clever way of looking at it. So, doff of the cap to you from Los Angeles, Kazu. I appreciate that. Nice work there.
Yeah.
And on that note, it is my glad duty to tell you that you've been listening to Comic Lab, the show about making comics and making a living from comics.
Your wonderful guest this week, and if you have kids in your life, if you're an adult in your life that you like to feel joy and excitement and passion and adventure, you've got to go check out his work. Kazu Kibuishi, the best place, boldcity.com to check him out, but also in libraries and bookstores everywhere. You can look for the entire 9-book series now, right? Or is it on 8 books now?
The 8th book comes out next week. And
exciting.
But 9 is the final. It finishes in 9, right? Is that why my brain sees on 9?
Yeah, it will finish at 9. And I have other books that I've been developing, so I'm not going to quit.
Good.
Woo-woo! Yeah. My kids just got super excited at that phrase. That's amazing. And then also, if you have not treated yourself to go back and read the Flight anthologies, please go do it. There's some amazing work in there that Kazu both edited and created in there, and I highly recommend it. But your hosts have also been Brad Geiger, the editor of webcomics.com and the cartoonist of Evil Inc. at evil-comic.com.
And Dave Kellett, co-director of Stripped and cartoonist of Sheldon at sheldoncomics.com and Drive at drivecomic.com.
And the Comic Lab theme song is used with permission from Andy Creighton at theworldrecord.net. And this episode was edited by Matt Woodard of Woodsong Productions at www.woodsong.media.
Comic Lab is made possible by your support at patreon.com/Comic Lab, so we'll go ahead and say that twice. Patreon.com/Comic Lab.